What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Buffalo Dash. As you can see, I finally have a co-host. This is Kieran. I'm going to let him go ahead and introduce himself really quickly.
What up, everybody? My name is Kieran Murphy. I'm a senior journalism student here at CU Boulder, and I'm ready to get after talking about the Buffs with Jason.
Awesome. It's definitely nice to have a co-host so we can finally have a nice little discussion going. So the biggest topic in our show right now, what are the top 6 Pac-12 stadiums? For me, my number 1 is the Rose Bowl. What about you, Kieran?
Number 1's got to come in at Folsom, man. I mean, I know it's a biased thought, but there's no stadium in the country that is right up against the foothills. I mean, you hear football announcers talk about it all the time. Folsom Field, it's got the Flatirons right there. It's just absolutely just one of the most iconic stadiums in the country.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely in the middle of my list. For my number 1, I went with the Rose Bowl. Although UCLA is kind of a struggling football team right now, I'd say it's got to be up there with one of the most historic college football stadiums in all of the nation. It hosts one of the most storied bowl game every year in the Rose Bowl, which now has become one of the games for the college football playoff every other year. And I think that even though UCLA kind of struggles to fill the seats, when it's a full stadium, when it's the bowl game, it's arguably one of the greatest places in college football to be.
Respond to Eric in the chat, and I was going to put, right in at number 2. For myself, I would say, the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, man. I think that it even, so I don't even think that the Rose Bowl wins number 1 in terms of the city of LA. I think that, the Coliseum, it's a storied place. It hosts like I think the more storied Pac-12 team in the city of Los Angeles, and I mean that place is just you can feel the history when you walk in it. You can feel that the place is more than 100 years old. It's awesome.
Definitely. And for my number 2, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, at Sutin Stadium. That's where the Oregon Ducks play in Eugene. I've personally never been there, but it's probably on my next college football stadium to be. I've a bunch of friends who go to Oregon, and they arguably on TV, the stands always look full. They seem like they have some of the most rowdiest crowds in college football. I would say second to Colorado, in my opinion. But it just overall, the stadium looks absolutely beautiful. Some of the best fans in college football. Plus, it helps that you have one of the top college football programs in the nation. So if you have a winning team, you're going to fill the stands. You're going to have great fans. I think number 2 in terms of Pac-12 definitely has to be the Oregon Ducks Stadium.
Yeah, right on. I mean, I think it's I think that you're right. You're onto something there with how just how passionate the Oregon fan base is. You know what I mean? It goes beyond just the fact that they're wearing different uniforms every Saturday. You know what I mean? Like they've got really Nike hooking them up there, but. Yeah, they really do. I mean, Oregon's got some of the nuttiest fans, and they pack that thing to the max. Every Saturday. I feel like, regardless of who's in town, and they make it a game. So, yeah, I think you make a good point there. What comes in at number 3, Jason?
So for me, number 3 is Folsom Field. I tried to steer away from a little bit of bias, even though I think Folsom Field is where it should be at number 3. When I came to Colorado, I'd never been to Folsom before. And the first time I watched a college football game there, I was kind of spoiled because it was the game we beat Nebraska in overtime and we rushed the field. And that was just a completely different atmosphere than what Colorado usually is. But you can't beat the view of the Flatirons, like you said. Arguably one of the greatest views in college football, in my opinion. The stadium is, no matter who we're playing, is at least 95% full. Most of the time it is full just because Colorado's got some of the greatest fans in the Pac-12 and in college football. And as analysts has liked to say, it quite possibly could be the loudest 50,000 person stadium in college football. When we're getting jumping, when it's a 3rd and long for their team, and the whole student section's making all the noise, it's such a great place to be. What about you? What's your number 3?
I mean, just to build off what you're saying, I think it's a testament that all the benches in Folsom are literally sort of like leaning forward, sort of down. Like they're not comfortable to sit on at all because students just sit up. I mean, students are, standing, jumping on them, the entire game. So, if you're just trying to sit on them as a normal spectator, like you're not gonna, they're not the most comfortable, but that's, because that's not from a student perspective what they're there for. Number 3 for me, could be an unpopular opinion. I haven't been there personally, but I've been by it, like I've driven by it, stuff like that, and their football team has been on the rise recently, especially in the Pac-12, and giving CU a hard time. Is Rice Eccles Stadium, University of Utah, in Salt Lake City there. Maybe I'm just, too partial to the mountains here. It's another one that's just, it's situated sort of, right at, like, sort of right in the center of, like you've got the, the city of Salt Lake right there. You've got the mountains, like kind of surrounding it, almost on all sides, especially when you get that aerial view. And the thing is that University of Utah's team, has just really sort of been drawing increasing attention to, to that stadium. I think that, it's one that kind of tends to get overlooked because similar to CU, it's not the biggest stadium in the Pac-12, but I think that there's something to be said for the smaller stadiums that are able to, fill the entire thing up and then be the loud, as you were saying, with Folsom, like the loudest, 50,000 person stadium, versus being, a 75,000 person stadium that's 3/4 full.
Definitely. Yeah, I have to agree. Like you said, the view of the mountains and where it's nestled, especially in night games when it's cold and there's snow in the mountains, it's absolutely beautiful. It definitely helps that they have an up-and-coming football program that's going to compete for Pac-12 championships for years to come. For me, it didn't land in my top 6 just because I think it lacks a little history, and the only fact that Utah has now kind of become relevant again in terms of football. They were kind of like 10 years ago, and now they are again. But they're definitely teetering my top 5. What about you? What's your number 4?
So, I mean, I think number 4 for me, as you already mentioned, I'd say the Rose Bowl. The Rose Bowl, it sort of, I think it's more of a storied stadium for the bowl game that it hosts, more so than for the UCLA football that it hosts. Especially in previous years, but I think just in general, you know what I mean? Like when I think Rose Bowl, I think like, Vince Young, playing for Texas versus, USC, like, early 2000s, marching down the field, trying to beat them for fourth quarter, New Year's Day, Rose Parade, that's what I think of when I think of the Rose Bowl, more so than like UCLA Bruins. And recently it's been a little bit of a sadder sight given, UCLA definitely doesn't get the fans, out there in the same way that a lot of other Pac-12 schools do. And, some of that's definitely due to, the success of their football team recently. But how about you? What's coming in at number 4?
So number 4 was arguably, I think, my hottest take. And number 4, I have the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum where the Trojans play. This definitely can go at the number 3 spot and replace Folsom. You can't deny the history, much like you can't deny the history of the Rose Bowl. The hosting the 2 Olympics, the fact that it's a veterans memorial, the new upgrades it just had makes it look 10 times better than it used to. It seems like such a great place to watch a college football game. But I feel like when it's not full, the place is hard to get loud. And I think it definitely struggles in an aspect of fan experience. But other than that, USC is a good football team again. They got a Heisman candidate. He's going to be fun to watch. So in years to come, and the USC football rises back to being on top of the college football world, I definitely think this can slide into that 3 spot and possibly even higher. And then in terms of my number 5, I put the Husky Stadium where the Washington Huskies play. Much like Folsom and Utah, what a great setting, right on the water. You overlook downtown Seattle. It's an absolutely beautiful stadium, it seems like. I feel like you always have a home field advantage because it seems to always be cold in Seattle. That being said, like Utah, it seems like before 2016, that team wasn't relevant, and now that the team has kind of fallen off and they're this in-between period of their football program, I think that doesn't help either. But they seem like they always fill the stands. But But other than filling the stands and being the setting, having a nice stadium, I think it just lacks a little history and it lacks a decent football program right now. But it'll get there. What about you? What's your number 5?
I think I would agree with. I think the Husky Stadium. I think that's a deserving 5. I think that like Oregon, I think there's something in the water up in the Pacific Northwest, man, in terms of how fervent fan bases are. You know what I mean? I think that everybody that I know who's everybody who's a UW fan, I know that they're a UW fan. You know what I mean? I think that I think that they show out in numbers regardless of how good the team is, regardless of how relevant the football is, whether they're a top 25 contender, sort of or not. And I think being right there on the water sort of gives me, it reminds me of like Chicago Bears Stadium, reminds me of the San Francisco Giants baseball stadium, stuff like that, where they're literally just parked right there. Got just absolutely beautiful views. Definitely get some wind going through there. But I think the Husky Stadium's a good number 5.
Definitely. In the chat, Nathan says that the Huskies have been relevant more years in Colorado, but you have Colorado ranked number 3. Yeah, that's definitely true. I can't disagree with you, but tell me, before 2016, were you guys relevant? You guys have been relevant for maybe 3 years. You made the college football playoff in 2016, but your football team seems to be in an in-between period, and I'd say the Colorado-Washington game's a toss-up. If anything, definitely leaning towards Colorado. So, we'll definitely have to see when that comes around. But you bring up a good point. I got to give you that. Then, Kieran, in terms of kind of wrapping this up, what's your number 6?
Number six was tough for me, especially just as the number of stadiums that I've been to personally sort of starts to dwindle a bit. I think that one of the I think that fan experience has a lot to do with for me what gives a football team or a football stadium, its ranking. And it doesn't have to be the biggest, most beautiful stadium in order to have the, just sort of like one of the best, as you're sort of saying, one of the best experiences that, a stadium can offer. Sometimes, that's sunsets and beautiful mountains. I think that the Stanford football stadium, though, while not sort of having the same just like cachet just from if we're just talking about the stadium itself, I think that the Stanford campus is hands down, perhaps one, contends for one of the most beautiful beautiful campuses, college campuses in the country. And then the Stanford students, man, they somehow, they study right up until just before the game. They get after it for the football game, and then they go right back to studying. And my hat's off to them. But I've got to say that when you see that funky looking tree doing its big wobbly thing, you see that their student band is hands down sort of, I think, one of the best bands in the country. The kids just dress up super goofy and they get super after it. That they're all really good at their instrument because Stanford. I've been to some really, really awesome games there, and it's a storied program with a storied team, and so there's a lot of history there. But what ended up rounded out, your number 6?
So my number 6 was Arizona State Stadium. The stadium before was recently redone. Definitely would not have ranked at number 6, but the new redos they just did makes the stadium really nice. It's got a lot of history there. Obviously, it hosted the Arizona Cardinals football team before their stadium was built. It got to see Pat Tillman play there, one of the most electric players in college football, and it definitely helps that, much like other stadiums, their football program is on the up and up. They have Jaden Daniels, one of the most electric quarterbacks in all of college football, even though he lost to Colorado last year, which was an awesome game. But I definitely think it's a super awesome stadium. They got a lot of great fans. They definitely fill the stadium, but it isn't quite there in terms of a top 5 stadium for me. But yeah. I think we both have some disagreements, have some agreements, but that's all personal opinion. That's our top 6 Pac-12 stadiums. Now, Moving on to our next topic of the show, we are going to be talking about what's up with the Buffs in the NFL. So I guess the biggest name right now has to be Laviska Shenault. What do you think?
Yeah, I think absolutely Laviska Shenault. I think that I think Awuzie was he had a big pick. What was it? Yeah, I guess it was last weekend for the Cowboys and stuff. But I mean, so Viska's it's his first, his first year in the NFL. I think that he's already starting to create some fantasy value for himself. Everybody saw the touchdown that he had against the Titans. He had a little bit of a quieter week last week and stuff, but I think honestly it comes down to with Viska, the combination of his hands and his feet. The guy can he can catch the ball and be a super he can be super threatening from a just like running routes to whether he's running the football like from behind the quarterback. So I think that he's out there with another Pac-12 alum, Gardner Minshew, former Wazoo guy, and we know how we saw the sort of the rise that Gardner sort of had as a as the Jaguars quarterback last year, and sort of making Jaguars football relevant again after who knows how long. The sort of Minshew magic kind of craze definitely picked up. And so, yeah, I think that Viska right now for me is the most exciting CU football player in the NFL. But how about yourself?
I definitely have to agree. I think Viska has it all there. It comes down to how the Jaguars utilize him. I saw a highlight of him playing the Wildcat, which he did a lot of at Colorado, which he was super successful, especially those like 3rd and 2, 4th and 2s. He just power ran up the middle for 3 yards, but that's really all you needed. And it's that and staying healthy. His Colorado career was really hampered by the amount of injuries he's had. That affected his draft stock. Obviously, he slid to the 2nd round. But much like you said to Gardner Minshew, I think him, Minshew, and Shenault can definitely become the faces of Jaguar football. Not only that, but they can make the Pac-12 look really good. That look, you produce these 2 great players, and now they're the face of an NFL franchise. What does that say to these 2 Pac-12 schools? What does that say to the Pac-12 in general? So there's definitely a young nucleus there. They're both still, obviously, Minshew has a year and Laviska only has 2 games. But from what we've seen, that could definitely be a super exciting connection. I definitely think Viska is one of the better busts, but I think in front of him has to be Mason Crosby. Especially last year. Yeah, that's my hot take.
No, I wouldn't say it's even a hot take. I think that Mason Crosby sometimes doesn't get the CU love, man.
Exactly.
But, yeah, tell me more.
So, last year, the biggest thing in the NFL was the struggles that kickers went with. It was arguably one of the worst years for place kickers in all of NFL, and one of the names being thrown out as the most consistent was Mason Crosby. And I think he's always been that under the radar Colorado guy who just was great in Colorado and then transferred his greatness into the NFL and has been super consistent for the Packers. I definitely think he's a name that doesn't get thrown around a lot as it should be. But what do you think? You definitely think he deserves a lot more recognition than the amount he's getting?
Yeah, man. I think that he does definitely deserve. He deserves definitely some more attention. I mean, and it's one of those things where I think one of the things that can happen with people our age is the fact that Mason Crosby was sort of he was popular with the Buffs and stuff. I mean, he's been in the NFL for as long as I can remember. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that so I think that that's part of why he starts to slip my mind, and which is a disservice to him. And he totally was just one of the best place kickers. I mean, we saw even last week, in the NFL, there's guys shanking kicks left and right. And so I think that it'll be exciting to see, if Crosby can just turn into one of these kickers who is able to, use his longevity to be in the league for as long as he possibly can. And so, so I mean, I think that Crosby, honestly, I would agree with that take.
Yeah, definitely. And I think to throw in a name, one more name, who doesn't add any fantasy value, but in a way he kind of affects someone. Also in the Packers is David Bakhtiari, the left tackle. Absolute beast in the NFL. Probably a top 3 left tackle in all of the NFL. And while he doesn't affect his fantasy value, he definitely helps Aaron Rodgers' fantasy value go up by protecting his left side. So unfortunately, he doesn't add anything, but I definitely think he's a name that just kind of has to be brought up in general. What about you? Okay, it seems like we might have lost Kieran there for a second. But yeah, so we're gonna segue into our next topic, which is some games that Buffs fans should be looking out for come a football season. So, I don't think there's a lot to be looking forward to for Colorado fans, but I definitely think we're going to field a good enough team to where I think we can make some games interesting. I think the biggest one we should be looking forward to is the game about ASU. So last year, obviously we had a better team last year, in my personal opinion, but I think we added enough to make our team competitive again. And I think the fact that ASU is coming into Folsom definitely helps the fact that we're going to have some sort of home field advantage. But if we can get to Jaden Daniels early, we can disrupt his offense, and we can put some kind of points on the board early in the first quarter. I think that definitely propels our chances to win that game. I definitely think that can be a trap game for Arizona State. I think they come in thinking, hey, this is Colorado. We're going to roll right over them. This is going to be an easy win for us, a big Pac-12 road win. But I think that we can win that game, move forward, have that. I think at that time they'll probably be a ranked team. Have that ranked win under our belt and make a name for this young, inexperienced Colorado team. I think another game that quite possibly I think could shock a lot of people is the USC game. Now we totally blew our chance to beat them last year in Folsom. Keaton wasn't what he was last year. What he is this year. We lost our opportunity to win that game. But I think we go into the Coliseum and we shock a very good USC team. I think we surprise a lot of people. I don't think we're going to win the game, but I think we can make that game really competitive. And I think that we can definitely prove that USC has some weaknesses, especially in terms of their just their offense in general. So I think we can definitely exploit some things in that USC team for other teams to look at. Not necessarily win that game, but make that game a lot closer than not only USC expects it, not only Colorado fans expect it, but Pac-12 football fans in general. Another game, which I think is a very, very winnable game that we can win, is the Washington game. Now, I kind of spoke to this a couple shows ago when I went through our schedule. The Washington football program is, I think, in a kind of a point of limbo right now. They just fired their coach. They got a new one. Their quarterback left for the NFL draft. They're getting a new quarterback. So I think we can go into Washington and shock the world a little bit. Prove that this Washington team kind of lost some of its edge that it used to hold as a good team. Go in there and win a very winnable football game. Kieran, glad to have you back. It's good to have you back.
Yes. Sorry, had some technical difficulties. We're back now.
So I was just running through what games should CU fans be looking forward to. The ones I've mentioned are the ASU game when ASU comes to play in Folsom, and then 2 road games in USC and in Washington. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, of all the games that I want to see the Buffs, be able to play, it's the Trojans, man, and it gets held over, over my head by friends of mine who go to USC and stuff all the time about like the losing streak that we were on with them. It's embarrassing. I thought last season, I thought we had them at home. That game is just it's so brutal for me to have to relive. We had them right where we wanted them. Then they come back and just stormed back, just took all the air out. In Boulder. I think that's definitely the game that I'm most looking forward to seeing, and sort of seeing how sort of Carl Durrell and a new CU football team is able to be able to handle them. I don't know, to be honest. I don't know one way or another whether it's the most winnable game or not, because we just we haven't been able to see anything from the CU from the CU team or any of the teams really yet. But all we do know is that they've got a great quarterback coming back that could potentially be a Heisman candidate, which leaves me from a perspective of wanting to like who do I think we definitely have a shot at, and who do I think we can beat. I think that Carl Durrell facing his former UCLA team, I think will be exciting, especially given that he was given that he played there, he coached there previous to coming to CU. And that UCLA struggles in the past have been sort of winnable game. Have left them as a winnable game for us in the Pac-12. But and I think that Washington State, Oregon State, offered some similar sort of winnable games there. But obviously, the better teams in the Pac-12 aren't going to be looking at us like, oh, congrats on those wins. So, I'm excited to see, just who exactly we can get after. But USC, I've got to say, is just the one that like bothers me the most.
Yeah, no, definitely. I had to agree with you. I think this is the Colorado team that teams look at and be like, oh, like this is a cakewalk. But I think this Colorado team can surprise the people. Maybe not in a game like USC, which, they're just flat out the better team. But like you mentioned, the Washington teams are definitely not what they used to be. And I think these are games that Colorado can win and make a statement that say, hey, we're not an experienced game, but an experienced team, but we're winning games that we should, which we failed to in the past. And we've seen in the past, especially last year, losing games to Arizona and an Air Force and a Washington State. So I think you're right. While the USC game is definitely going to be entertaining just to see the talent USC puts on the field, especially watching their quarterback, I think people also need to watch some of the not as popular games, because I think we can definitely make a statement by winning those games and proving a lot to people.
Yeah, I mean, they'll certainly be, here's the thing is like this whole season, certainly with the schools from the other Power 5 conferences, especially those that chose not to do this sort of like to postpone their seasons in the same way that the Pac-12 ultimately decided to and stuff. I think overall, even regardless of that, this season's got an asterisk in it, right? You know what I mean? Like this season, it doesn't have fans. It doesn't have, if it does have any, it's gonna be very few. Student sections do not play the same sort of role. Then playing at home just in general, is not going to have the same sort of role. I think that's one place where CU does have an advantage is, one home field advantage that we get. Regardless of however few people there are in our stadium, is the fact that, we're playing, just, a little bit more than a mile high above sea level, you know what I mean? Hopefully get some teams that, haven't been able to necessarily be sort of training at the same level that they would normally, in football preseason, to come up here and just get absolutely winded while our guys have been, the practice that they have been able to hold has been at elevation and stuff. I think that'll be really good. But yeah,
I agree. Yeah, awesome. What a great point to end it on. So with that, thank you guys so much for coming to another episode of Buffalo Dash. If you want to see more of us, follow us on social media, our Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. We post highlights of our shows, as well as those are places that we live stream our shows as well. If you want to visit our website, dashsports.tv, and we recently partnered with a site called Sports Pac-12, and they post a lot of great Pac-12 only content. A bunch of our hosts post columns there, me included. That was a big topic about my rankings of the stadiums, but super awesome content. On behalf of Kieran and I want to thank you guys so much for coming. Can't wait to see you guys next week for a new show. Have a great day.
Let's go Buffs.